In this video, we're gonna make a budget template. So this could be used for monthly budget, yearly budget, pretty much any date range you wanna use. So in this case, see, I have this options to select our start and end date. And basically, we have our main categories for our budget going on here, and we have our planned amounts, and we have our actual amounts in this column. What we can do, we can basically just choose any month or range of dates. So for example, if I go from October 1st until October 31st, then we're gonna get everything updated and we'll get our numbers. And as you can see, we get our total. And as you can see, overall, we went 1.55% over our planned budget. And then we have our main categories. So we have our fixed expenses right here. Again, you have your comparison and so on. And then we have this little bar that fills in as our amounts grow or shrink. I can also go here and start from September 1st. Now I have 2 months. And again, the same way, it's going to just calculate our planned amounts versus our actual amounts. And all of that is based off this actual expenses right here. And then we have our planned expenses right here. So we can also add those here. So for example, as of right now, if I go to dashboard, you'll see that for my food cost for, let's just move this to October. For my food cost for October, right now, I have 2,850 planned amount. Now, if I wanted to change that, I could go to planned expenses and either change one of these existing food costs, or I can add another one for October. So I can say, okay, so in October, we're also planning to have, let's say, tomatoes. And that's going to be food cost category, and we're going to enter some amount. So now that amount should be automatically included in our dashboard for that month. See, this is our actual current cost, and you can see based on our plan, like this green bar goes 73% of our planned amount. And if I go to our actual expenses and add some actual expense for this, so right now it's 2,740. So let's say I go to actual now and add something to our expense. Now that should be automatically showing up in our food cost right here, and see now this went up to 81% of planned. This is the way it's gonna work, and anything that is not assigned to one of these categories, it's going to automatically go to other. Just to give you an example, if I go to actual expenses, let's say we had some unexpected something happening in here. And I'm not going to assign to any category. So with that, if I go back to my dashboard, you'll see it will be under other. Right here, we have our expense. So that's pretty much how this whole thing works. In this example, I'm going with this restaurant business, but you could take this example and use it for personal. You can use it for any other business. So we're going to build this entire thing from scratch so you can see exactly how it works. There is this extra option if I go to any one of these categories. So let's say we have this fixed expenses category. Now you can see that total fixed is 11,150. Now, if I wanted to see all the details behind that number, I can click on this fixed, click on this link, and that's going to take me here when it's going to show those lines, basically from our actual expenses list. So let's go ahead and get started. So first, let's do some setup. Let's just rename this one. Let's call this dashboard. I'm going to add a couple of other tabs here. One of these I'm going to call setup. This one we'll call it actual expenses. And we're going to make one more here, but that one I'm going to make a little later. So for a start, I'm going to go to setup. And in setup, I'm going to create some categories. And you can do any categories you want, obviously. I'm going to do something like fixed payroll, food cost, utilities. That's it for now. Obviously, you would just update your categories the way it makes sense for your type of operation. So I'll go to actual expenses and put some columns. Having a second level category would probably be a good idea in case you have a lot going on. So for this date column, so I'm just going to click here, Control Shift down, and I'll go under data and do some data validation. I'm going to make sure that this is a date. Don't accept any other input, hit save. So now if you just double click on one of these, it should just open a calendar. Description would be just description. For categories, I want to have one of these categories as an option. So we'll select starting from here, Control Shift down. Depending on how much stuff you do, you probably want to add more rows to this. So I'm going to go under data and do data validation again. And for this, I'm going to do list from a range. Click on this little icon, go to that setup, and select starting from this fixed. And I'm going to do Control Shift down to select all the way down and press OK. Reject any other input, save. So what this is going to let us do is basically if we go to actual expenses, we'll have drop downs and we can just pick one of those categories. And if you wanted to have more choices, you would just come back here to setup and add more like this. And if I go back now and take a look, see it's an option here. In my case, I'm just going to leave these 4. So now that's what I got. And finally, for amount, we want these to be some sort of numbers. So I'm going to select again all the way, data validation, and this should be a number. So let's just choose something like greater than. I pretty much want to have any numbers, so I'll just do negative, pretty much the largest number you could think of that could go negative here. So I'm just going to do 1,000,000. Reject any other input, hit save. So the reason for that is now if you go and try to just type something, you have to actually enter a number. So that's all I need in this expense worksheet. There's not much else I'm going to be doing here other than just adding some expenses to this particular columns. So I'll go to dashboard, which is where we're going to do most of our work. First, we need to build a dashboard model. So right now, I'm just going to do some made up numbers. Later on, we'll convert all of those to formulas. So I'll do something like date range. Basically, these would be like your start date and end date. So in this example, I want this to only let the user select some particular dates. So for that, I'm going to go to setup and do that here. Let's just enter January 1st, 2021. And this will be our entry. So I'll just convert it to a different color. The rest I'm going to build with formulas here. So I just want start dates to be the first day of the month. So I'll just do eDate. Click on the start date and do comma 1 month offset going forward. So that should do that. And then I can drag this down for as long as I feel I need this to go. So you can come back later and add more. So for end date, we'll use EO month function. Click on this date and do 0 months offset. And that should give us the last day of each month. And if your initial date is something different, you can just change this and all of them should update. For me, this is good enough. I'm going to do this. Now I can choose this and this to be my data validation range. So I'll go to dashboard. For start date, I'm going to go data validation, list from a range, click on this thing, go to setup and basically just choose starting from here and all the way down like that. Reject other input, hit save, and do the same for our end date. So I'll go to dashboard, data validation, list from a range, and the same thing, only we'll choose these. Save this, reject other input, hit save, and our options are still here for our setup. Let's just make this bold. And for dashboard, we have our start and end dates. So let's just do something like September. So that's that. Now, after this, I'm going to need some sort of actual versus planned columns. So I'll just go here someplace and label those. So I'll do something like this one, actual, and this will be planned. I'm going to give these cells below some dark background like black, just for design purposes for this. So right now I want to build one block that I can copy and paste. So let's just create an example. So I'm just going to go here and do something like 23% of total. So this will be our, let's say, rent, property, taxes. This is like a short description of some sort. So the category that's going to go here is going to be one of these categories in my setup, main categories. So I'll start with this fixed. So I'll go here and do fixed. And right next to it, we'll be entering some amounts. And that will be the actual amount in this column based on this column label on top. And right here, we'll have our planned amount for all of this. So for now, I'll just do the same thing. So right here, I want to have something that says what percentage of planned amount this actual amount is. And right here, I'm going to do a little graph. And we'll get to that in a second. So right now, let me just make this really small. And let's try to build a little graph here. It will be basically a sparkline, so we'll do equal sparkline. And for a sparkline, let me just zoom out a little bit. We basically need the data itself, and we need to type a chart. So I'm just going to copy right this example, close this, and as data, I'm just going to choose this actual amount, comma. Then you need the actual options, so I'm going to paste that example. And you can see here we have the chart type, which says a bar chart, and then what the maximum is. So basically how large the scale should be. So right now they have this 50. What I'm going to do, I'm going to use this planned amount as the scale size. So for now, I'm just going to close this parentheses here and hit enter. So you can see, since this is 12,000, this is 12,000, this line basically covers the whole cell. Now, if I change this to like half of planned, so let's say 6,000, you'll see it will basically go half of that thing. We have the scale, which is this, and this is half of that. Or if we do like 10,000, well, you see where this is going. So I'm just going to go back to 12,000 to cover the whole thing. And I want to change the color for this. So I'm going to go back here and to this list of options right here in curly brackets. I'm going to do a semicolon and use this option color 1. Let's just do that correctly, comma, and then we need to provide the color in quotes. So for example, if I do red, that should do a red graph. Now I want this to be green of some sort. Now let me just choose that green over here. So I'm going to open this, choose one of these greens. I want that to be a little brighter green. So let's just go pick something like this. So this is the color. So I'm going to copy that, go back here, and in the formula, instead of red, I'm just going to paste that hex color, and that should be the color of that line. Let's just get rid of this. Now this color, if it's equal or less than the planned amount, I want this to stay green. But if we go over that amount, so if our planned, let's say, is 12,000 and this is 13,000, at that point, I want this to go red. So how can I do that? I'm going to go back here, and instead of just doing this color as hard-coded string, I'm going to do a formula right here. I'm going to say if, open parentheses, this actual amount right here is greater than this planned amount right there, comma, then we want this to be some sort of red color. For now, I'm just going to use red in quotes. Otherwise, we're going to use this green color. So I'll just close my if function parentheses right there, hit enter, and you'll see right now we get a red color. But if I change this 13,000 to, let's say, 11,000, it will go back to green. If I go to 12,000, it's going to still be green. But if I go $1 more, it should go red. So that seems to work just fine. I want to choose a little different shade of red though. So let's just try to find maybe this. I'm going to go to custom, choose this color, copy that, go back to my formula, and pretty much instead of this red, we'll just paste that hex color again. So there we go. That should take care of that little spark line. Now right here where it says 100% of planned, I actually want to calculate what percentage of planned this is. So this is going to be our planned, this is the actual. If we want to know what percent of planned our actual is, we'll do equals, we'll take our actual amount and divide it by planned amount, hit enter. And right now we get a 1 because it's not basically formatted as percentage. If I switch this to percent, it's 100%. Now, if I do something like 10,000 here, it's 83.3%. And then if I go over like 14,000, it's going to be 116% of planned. So that works great. I want this a little more rounded. I don't want to do this decimal point thing just to make it smaller in size. And I actually want to say this percentage of planned. So for that, I'm just going to do some custom format for the cell. So I'm going to click here, go to format, go to number, and scroll all the way, more formats, custom number format. And here for our format, we're going to do some custom formatting. So I'll just do 0% to have our rounded number. And then I want some text after this. So for my text, in quotes, I'm going to do of planned. Like this. And if I hit apply right now, you'll see it says 117% of planned. Now, if I change this to 12,000, then it's 100% of planned. So that's great. Let's just do a little bit of formatting here. I'm going to do some accounting format for this. I'll center all of that, both horizontally and vertically. Probably this one too. So this, let's make it size 8. This 6 is good. Let's make this 12. Also probably bold. These two, size 10, it's fine. And this one, let's do 8. And just overall, let's just change default font here. So I'm going to just click in this upper left corner, go to this font, and I'll choose something like, I don't know, this one maybe. Now for these two cells right here, what I want to happen, if our actual amount is over our planned amount, then I want to show by how much it's actually over. If it's not, I just want to say something like budget amount or planned amount, something like that. So let's start with that percentage. So I want to only show the percentage that went over. So right now, it's not over. Let's actually create that situation. Let's do like this 14,000. So for that, what I'm going to do a formula here. I'm going to do equals. I'm going to take this 14,000, the actual divided by planned. And I want only the amount that's over. So I'm going to do -1 to remove 100% from the number. And see, we got 0.16. Basically, it's some sort of percentage. Right now, let's just make percent 16.67. So that's how much we went over the budget. But what I want to happen when I go to a number that's not over budget, I don't want this to go like negative number. I want it to be 0. So for that, to not have this negative numbers, I'm just going to use max function. So I'm going to say choose this or 0. Which one is higher? So if it's a negative number, just put a 0 in there. If it's a positive number, it's going to choose our higher positive number. And that way we can go either 0, or if we go over, it will actually show that percentage. Now the next thing I want here, I want also the difference. So here I'm just going to do equals this minus this to show that amount. But yet again, if we didn't go over that amount, I don't want to show this negative number. So again, I'm going to do that max formula. I'm going to say max, either that or 0. And now I have my numbers. Let's just change this to that. So a couple of things about formatting I'm going to do here. I'm going to make sure that this number right here says 8.33% over. But I want that to only happen when it's actually over. When it's not over, so when it's like 0 or less, I don't want to have anything in a cell. I just basically want this empty. So I'm going to click on this, go to format, and do number, and do another custom format for this. Custom number format. And see, I want that to have those decimal points in this case. So I'm going to choose this default percentage formatting. But I want to add that text over. So I'm going to do in quotes space over. I'm going to do a semicolon to make my negative numbers basically nothing, and do another semicolon to also make 0 to have no text. So I'm not going to provide any formatting for negatives or zeros. I am only going to provide formatting for positives. So right now what's going to happen if I hit apply, see it says 8.33 over, but if I go here and change this to be not over, that just disappears from here. So that works. For this one down here, when it goes over the dollar amount, I want it to say like plus and then show by how much it's over. And then if it's not over, I just want it to say budget amount, just text. So again, I'm going to use custom formatting for all of this. So I'm going to go to format, go number, more, custom number format. And I'm going to start with the first one. So the first one is going to be dollar amount, but I want a plus sign in the beginning. So I'll do plus space, and then I'll do dollar. If you want a different character, you can use your own currency. I'm going to do that dollar amount, and then I'm going to use pound key for our dollar amount. If you want to do like 1,000 separator or something, you could do comma like this. So that should be fine. I don't care about cents in this case, so I'm not going to do cents. So that should be the formatting I want when it's over. Semicolon. Then we have our negative numbers. So for negative numbers, we're not going to get negative numbers, so it doesn't matter. So I'm going to do semicolon, skip that. And for 0, I just wanted to say budget amount. So I'm going to do that in quotes, press apply. So you'll see right now it says plus 1,000 because our actual went $1,000 over, right? So if I go 12,500, that would be 500 over. But if I go below, see, I will just get budget amount, just text. And that should be also when it's just 12,000. So I'll go for this 8, and for this, let's go smaller, 7. I also want these to go red when they're over. So I'm going to say if this number is greater than 0, here or here, change it to that red color and do some sort of white text. So I'm going to select this, go to Format, and do conditional formatting. And I'm going to say is greater than 0. It should be this red color, and it should be this white font. Press OK. Close this. I'm going to center this one. Do some background color for this. And change the font for this to white, probably too. So now if I change this to a lower amount, so you can see what happens, you'll see this says budget amount. That's great. Let's actually make this bold and this bold, probably these two cells. And then if we go over, see it goes to this. Maybe bold was too much for this. Let's get rid of that. Okay, good. Now I want to get rid of all the grid lines. View, remove grid lines, and let's just add some of our own grid lines to make it look nicer. So I'll go to this borders, change some lighter gray color. Let's go with something like this and choose a regular line. So I'm going to do border around this. I'll just use this one right here. I want these two to kind of go together. So I'll do select these two, outer border for that. I'm not probably going to do any borders for this. I will do borders for these two. So for this one, let's just do outer border here, outer border for this. And for these two, again, together, I'll do a border like that. I want this row in the middle to be much smaller in size. Like this. So it more feels like these are together as one instead of two separate cells. This 500 doesn't look good. Let's try to play around with positioning of this, like center it maybe vertically. See, that's better. I'll add a thicker border here to the right. So I'll just go here, change it to a thick, dark border like this, and just this side. So I'll just click here and see. Nice border there. Maybe change this border between like this total and the line right there. Instead of being like a regular line, let's do more like a dotted line of some sort. So I'll go here and change this to a lighter color again. And change it to something like this. Dashed. And then just do this border below. So now it should be, see this dashed line. Maybe pronounce these lines right in the middle. So I'll just select this, add a black border, but a thin border this time, and do this on the right side of this, and also do this on the right side of this, like that. Maybe make this line 10 a little smaller. So this looks pretty good. Let's see what it looks like when we change this to a smaller number. Everything looks all right. Let's change this actual versus planned on top here too. I'm going to add some borders. Let's start with lighter gray. Again, go around both of these. Then make this one maybe to match this blue color. White color text. For this, center both of these. Both vertically and horizontally. Make the font size larger for both of these. I'm going to choose something like 12. Make it bold. I'm going to add those borders to this as well, because right now it looks like a solid black line. But if we add some gray borders to this, it should be a little better. And then I'm just going to make this kind of small like that. And I should apply something of this sort to this part as well. So I'll take this, paint this one, make these smaller, maybe not bold. Do a little thicker lines for these two. So I'm just going to choose black color. Let's choose that same blue color here too. All right, so we're almost there. What I need to do, I need to get another section similar to this, a little different for just totals. So I'll just position that here above this. Let's just add a few rows here. And then I'm just gonna select these three, Command C, Control C, copy that, go here and paste. And what I'll do for this one, instead of having this whole section, I will basically just merge all these cells together. And then for this, I'm gonna call it total. And I'll match the size from this. That's size 12 and bold. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll change the background color to black and text to white. And maybe even delete one of these rows. So for example, let's just do something like 20,000 for actual and 23,000, for example, planned. So this will be basically the total for the whole thing, and then we'll have our breakdowns down here. So I'm just gonna add a little line here and make it black, make this a little smaller. Okay, so this will be my total section, and the reason I wanted to do this total section is because there is one formula here that I didn't do yet. So all of these I already did with appropriate formulas, except this percentage right here and these actual amounts. Now, this percentage is going to basically show what percentage of the total is this particular category. So for that, we'll just change this to, it does this. I don't want to do that. I'm going to take this amount and divide it by this total amount right here. See, 57%. So now I'm going to change that to percentage. And then I want to say 57% of total instead of just saying this. So again, I'm going to go under format, number, and do some sort of custom format. And I don't want decimal points on this, so I'm just going to do this. And then in quotes, we'll do space of total. Like this. And I think that should do it. So I'm just going to hit apply. See, that's what it's going to be. So most of these are now formulas except these two, the actual amount and the budget amount. Now, the way these are going to become formulas, it's going to be based on whatever expense we actually enter here. So let's just make something up here really quickly. So I'm going to do it for this particular range of dates in September. So now based on this, when we have our fixed category, it should all be summed up here on our dashboard. And that should be our actual amount. Now, one thing we need to consider when we do this formula is that it only needs to sum up for this range of dates. So I'm going to do equals sum ifs, open parentheses. And we need to provide some range. So I'm going to go to my expenses and select this. Oops. Let's just redo this. Go back and select this much. Drop the end reference so it pretty much goes all the way down. I'm going to do F4 to make it absolute reference, to have these dollar signs, comma. I want to filter that to a particular date range. So I'm going to start with this date column. remove the end reference and do F4. So I want that date to be greater than or equal to the date selected. So I'm going to go to the dashboard and click on our start date. Again, F4 to lock that in place, comma. Then I need another filter by the end date. So I'll go to this, select this date range again, remove this, F4 for absolute reference. By the way, this is some ifs, so I cannot do this. This should be comma, and this must go in quotations, and we need to just concatenate this. So I'm going to take this second range again. For the second range, again, we want this range to be, I'm going to do less than or equal to, but depending if you have times, you may have to rethink this formula. But right now we don't have any times, so I'll just go with this less than or equal to. I'm going to concatenate, go back to dashboard, select our end date like this, F4 again. So now this should filter by this date column. One should be the start date limit and the other one is the end date. Now that should just give us the total for that range, but we want to filter this to that category fixed. So I'm going to do a comma here again. Go to my actual expenses, select this category column a little bit like this. Drop the end reference, F4. The formula is getting a little longer, so it goes to the next line. That's fine, comma. And for this, we need to make sure that that will be that particular category. So I'm going to go back to dashboard and click on this fixed cell. For this one, I'm not going to do absolute reference. I'm just going to leave it as is and close parentheses and hit enter. So you can see how I got 11,150, which should be basically all of these summed up together. Let's just check it here. See, sum 11,150. So that's correct. We get the right amount. Since I went this far, to be safe, in case you have times, we probably want to take this end range like this one and wrap it in int function to drop times out of this. For that upper range. For lower range, we don't have to worry about this. And because now this has this int in it, this should be an array formula. So I'm going to do Command-Shift-Enter or Control-Shift-Enter, and that should return the same amount. Now it's just safer if we have times. So for budget amount, the planned amount, we basically need another spreadsheet similar to this one that also has our budget amounts. So I'm just going to basically copy this. And I'm going to call it planned. And here, basically, just enter your planned amounts for this month. Just enter always the first date. If you have particular dates, you can use those. And just to be able to test this, we want to add something that's a little different or change our numbers. So for example, for property taxes, let's say we planned a little less. So now I need to sum these to get my planned amount. So that's going to be very similar to this formula right here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this formula, hit escape, go back to this cell and paste that same formula, hit enter for now. Apparently that went as text, not as a formula. Let's just delete that extra space in there. And there it is. Now, this is coming from actual expenses. Now I have to use this planned expenses worksheet. So I'm going to change this actual to planned pretty much in this formula. So actual goes to planned. And the rest should be exactly the same. So this is what was planned. This was the actual. This is 102% spent, and then we have our over percentage. Now, if I want to get the total should be pretty much the total for everything, but it should still be filtering to this date range. So I should be able to use these formulas largely, so I'm just going to copy this, hit escape, come back to this, paste the same formula. The only difference, for some reason it adds this space. Let me just get rid of that. So the only difference is going to be that I don't want this to be filtered to that particular category, like fixed, which is this last two arguments. So I'm just going to get rid of those two and just keep the rest. So if I hit enter, that should be our planned amount for everything combined. And then I should be able to copy this formula, hit escape, come back and paste it here. Remove this extra space, and then finally get rid of this last two arguments to not filter this to fixed category. So this should be our total for everything combined, 18,370. If I go here and select this, see 18,000, well, it says 570. Maybe I didn't read that correctly. Oh, this is the actual. So 570, correct. And then we have planned, which is a little less right here. So now we should be able to just take whatever I've done and do it for all the other main categories. So the main categories we did was fixed, payroll, food cost, and utilities. Right now, if I want to add payroll to this, I'm just going to select these three rows with all of these already built. Before I do that, let's make sure I actually locked all of these correctly. So if I go to this, so this should be locking to this total. So it should be C10, should be absolute. So I'm going to take that, highlight F4 to add $signs to just stick it in place so it doesn't move down. So let me just quickly check these. This should be relative fine, should be fine. Okay, I think that's it. So now I'm going to select these three rows, copy them right below, paste. The reason I'm selecting the row is because I want to actually preserve the size so I don't have to resize everything. And you can see right now what I got is the same amounts because this is fixed. Now I'm going to change that fixed to, let's say, payroll, one of the other categories. And we should be able to see it just works. And apparently that's 40% of total, right? Because this would be everything, because right now all I have entered in my planned and actual is just fixed and payroll. So let's just copy and paste this a couple of more times. So let me just go and write the right category names for this. And for everything else that's not one of those, we'll just call it other. Now, the way I'm going to calculate this other is going to be a little different. So what I'll do for this other, I'll just take this total and do minus the sum of all of these, and that will be the remaining amount. So I'll just go right here and do equals. I'll take total for actual, then I'll do minus this, then minus this, basically minus all of those above, all the actuals. And if I hit enter, well, we get a 0 because all the 100% is here. Then I'm going to do that for this too. So I'm going to do equals, and then I'll take my planned here minus this, minus this, pretty much. Minus all of those. Hit enter, and that should be that amount. Now, I do get some division by 0 errors, as you can see on some of these. So right now, because we have a 0 for some of these amounts, it actually gives us a division 0 error. So to not get those errors, what I'll do, I'll just add an if error function around this. So I'm just going to fix it for this one for right now. So this would be like if error, open parentheses, and then close parentheses here. And see, that would clean it up. And then the same here, if error, this. So it will basically just leave it empty. Now, I should have done that for all of these. So I need to, unfortunately, redo the first one and recopy and paste this. So I'm going to go back and do if error for this. And also if error for this. I don't think I had any other problems here. So once I did this, I'm going to copy this again, go over, paste it here, paste it here, paste it here. For this one, I'm not going to do anything. So I'm going to go back and just change this to right categories. And then we got this. So the reason I didn't want to change this is because I changed this formula and I didn't want to redo that. So it's easier just to add if error here. So basically we're saying if that's an error, just don't display anything. And there we go. So now this should just work by me going back to this planned and actual expenses and just adding whatever those expenses should be. Let's go and add some for utilities and see what happens, right? So I'm going to go to planned expenses and do, again, September, and do something like gas, and that will be utilities, and let's say that should be 450. And then I have another one, electric, something like that. So this should be now $750 planned. So if I go back to my dashboard, you'll see that shows up here. So now we need our actual amount. So when we come back here and enter those amounts, so now if I go to my dashboard, you'll see that it's 77% of planned, and it's 3% of this total. So let's go add some food cost for this too, so you can see how it works. And I'm gonna add that in actual as well. I'll just change this a little bit. So that should now go in our food cost category. See, works just fine. And finally, let's try other to make sure that works too. So the way that's going to work, if we go here and add something in our planned or actual, let's just call it fix AC. And then we're not going to assign it to a category. So here we'll just type some amount. And then we're going to go to our actual and basically enter that same thing. And let's say that went not the way we expected, so it was 450. Now, if I don't assign it to a category, it should go under other. So let's go and check in our dashboard. See, that's now under other, and it's 28% over our estimate. And then we have our total that goes here. Now, the cool thing about this whole thing is that this is for September, right? So what I can do now, I can go to this planned expenses, and let's say all of these will be the same mostly for October, right? So all I'm going to do, just change this to October. So now we can go and do actual expenses for October. So if I go right now to our dashboard and switch this to October, so I'll start from October 1st until the end. And I've just noticed I didn't do that if error for these, which I probably should. See, all of these, and also like this probably needs an if error in that case. So let's just add if error on this. And this. Just like that. Same for all of these. Since it's the same formula, I should be able to just copy the cell and Control V, Command V, paste over all of these. So now let's go and actually correct the range. This should go until here. And you can see now those budgeted amounts for our October month are just gonna pop up here. Now, if you wanted to look for like 2 months, you still can. So I can go here and do like September 1st, and you'll see how now we have our budgeted amounts for 2 months, and we have our actuals that we did enter for one of the months, right? So for now, I'm just gonna go back to October only. So no actuals in October, but now we can go to our actual expenses and basically just add those here, right? So if I just do some of these, and I'll just enter some of these October dates, change some of these amounts like this. So now we should have for our food cost a higher amount, and for our utilities higher amounts for actuals. So if I go to dashboard, we should be able to see that. That's our actual, this is our planned for utilities, which is that $1,000 coming from here. So as you can see, it just works. Now, if you wanted to see it for any date range, you pretty much can. So I can go here and check this starting from September 1st, and then it's just gonna show us both months, actual and planned. So basically, at this point, all we have to do, we have nothing to do in this worksheet. We're just gonna work in this planned and actual, just enter our planned amounts here, and then we go to actual and enter our actual amounts here. And as long as we assign it to the right category, that should just go to our dashboard the right way. Now, one thing I'm gonna do here, just for design purposes, I'm gonna delete one of these rows, and then we can just go and add freeze up to current row, which means when we scroll down, we should be able to see the date range like this. You could do it below actual and planned if you wanted to, so you can always see which column is actual, which column is planned. Now, we would probably want to add some filters to some of these reports right here in case somebody wants to come here and filter and see certain data. And then to make this even nicer, I guess, you could add some additional worksheets that just filters your report to these categories like fixed, payroll, food cost. So if you look at this total, you might want to know, how is this like $22,000? So for that, we would just have to create separate sheets for each one of these main categories. So let's start with one of them, like fixed. I'm gonna add a new tab here, call this one fixed. Maybe move it as the last tab, like this. And what I'm gonna do here, I'm just gonna skip a couple of rows on top. I'll do a filter function. Basically, using this filter function, I wanna filter to those items from this category, from fixed category, but I want to filter within the range that's selected here. So I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna do this for actual expenses. So I'll go to actual expenses, select this much from our data, not including headers. I'm gonna delete the end row reference, F4 to make it absolute reference for this, comma. So this is gonna be filtered by date first. So I'm gonna select this date column here, drop the end reference, do another F4. And I want that date to be greater than or equal to our start date. So I'll go to my dashboard, click on this start date from here. Again, just for good practice, I'm gonna do F4 for that too, comma. Then as a second filter, we wanna use the end date. So I'll go to actual expenses, again, select this much, remove the end row reference, F4, that same date column. I want this to be less than or equal to, go back to dashboard, click on our end date, F4 to make it absolute reference, comma. And then the last one is gonna be, I'm gonna go back to our data and select our category column. And again, end reference, remove that, F4. And I want that category right here to be equal fixed. In quotes, I'm just gonna type directly in the formula, close parentheses and hit enter. So you'll see that this now filters to September and October fixed numbers. Let's go to our dashboard. You'll see that's our date range. If I move this to just be September, like this, then if I go back and look at that same worksheet, it's just September. So again, one thing I'm gonna do just to be compatible with times as well, I'm gonna take this range for our end dates and wrap that in int function. And because now, again, it's an array formula, I'm gonna do Control-Shift-Enter or Command-Shift-Enter to use my array formula, and that gives me this. Now I can go ahead and add these column names, Control-C, Control-V, paste it here. And then the last thing I'm gonna do, just have some text here that says this is a report for that range of data starting from here, ending here. So for that, I'll go to fixed, and here I'm gonna do some concatenation. Let's just zoom in a little bit. I'm gonna do equals, I'll do report for date range. I'll add a colon and a space. So just some text basically. And then after this, I need to basically use that date range from the other tab. So for that, I'm gonna do an ampersand to concatenate. I'm gonna use text function because otherwise it's just gonna give us the number of the date instead of the date. I'm gonna go to dashboard, click on our start date, F4 for good practice again, comma, and in quotes, I'm gonna provide the way I want this to be formatted. So I'll do something like MDYYYY for month, day, year. You can format it any way you prefer. And you can see it kind of shows in a formula what that's gonna look like. So that's gonna be my start date. So after that, I'm gonna close that and do another ampersand and add like a space with dashes and do another ampersand, and then again do another text function to do the end date after this. So I'll click on this, F4, comma, and use that same, well, I just hit enter by an accident, but let's go back and use that same format for this. Just like that, hit enter, and see now it's gonna just show us this. So that's just a little nicer, I guess. We'll do merge and maybe even center it. Let's zoom out a little bit and center this like that, maybe make it bold. So now if I go back and change my range, since that is linked to these values, see, it's gonna automatically filter this and it's gonna show that this is for that range. So this is for fixed. I should be able to easily just make this for main categories. So I'm not going to do it for every possible category, just the main ones. So I'm going to do fixed, payroll, food cost, and utilities. So I'll just go ahead and duplicate this a couple of times. And go back to the first copy. Rename it to payroll. And now I have to go here and update my formula to filter this to payroll category. So that should do that. Then I'm gonna do that for the other two. Food cost, we'll go here and do our food cost. And finally, we have the last one, which is utilities. And the rest of the formula is going to stay the same, just this part will change to utilities to filter to those. So now what I'll do, I'll just go to my dashboard and just link from this title to the tab that has all those details. So I'll right click on this and insert link. So I'm going to click on this sheet name, and right here, we're going to link to that fixed worksheet. Now I'm going to do that for this one too, and basically for all four of them. And I'm not going to worry about other. I just do it for this main ones. I don't know if I like this blue color. Maybe I'll change it to black. But basically the idea is going to be is that if I come back to this and I, for example, look at my September date. So we have this range of dates for September. Then we'll look at this and it says utilities, for example, is this much, right? And we want to know what's in this $580. So we can click on this utilities now, click on this link, and it will open this and we can see. So we got gas and electric. And then we can go back to our dashboard. That should do it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.